officially kick it off. Welcome to Winning the Last Minute Booking Game. Smarter pricing meets faster turnovers. We are Breezeway and we are PriceLabs. I am Amber Prickett. I've been a solutions consultant at PriceLabs for the past about 3.5 years now. Before I was a solutions consultant at PriceLabs, I was on the operator side. I was a revenue manager for a couple of large operators in Northwest Florida. So, was revenue managing properties everywhere from Pensacola Beach to Panama City Beach, and I'm actually based out of Panama City.
Amazing. And I'm Koryn Okey. I'm the VP of Community Engagement here at Breezeway. I've been in the industry since, 2008, which is so crazy. And I've spent the last just over 8 years here at Breezeway. So really excited to be joining you guys today and talk about this subject, which is so important. So before we jump in, let me tell you guys a little bit about who we are at Breezeway, what we're doing, why we do it, if you aren't familiar. So Breezeway is a property operations and guest experience platform. And, we were really built because we understand how difficult it is for, all of you all as operators to deliver on the hospitality and the guest experience that folks are expecting. And so we have tools that will allow you to to make that happen, right? So folks are using our platform to run their cleans, their inspections, their maintenance. They're talking with their guests via communicate via text. We have guidebooks. We have an after hours call service. And we just really want to make sure that we're providing you with the tools that you need to empower your team to deliver on all of those important pieces of hospitality. And so we do that through a number of different parts and components of our product. But probably most well known, I guess, for many people, right, is the ability to schedule all of the work that needs to be done. And so there's automation for task management based off of reservations. We're integrated with over 50 PMS companies. So we're receiving those reservations and then placing the work on the calendar. We're communicating that out, helping you coordinate it with your team. And then they're completing that work via mobile apps that are available in over 10 languages. And then additionally, like I said earlier, we have a guest messaging product, so you can text back and forth. The appropriate folks within your team have the ability to interact with those guests. We have an after hours call service that we call Assist, which is helping to really act as an extension of your organization and handle those guest questions that are coming in, which is really great when we start to think about, reducing the burnout and the burden on your staff. Additionally, we have our guidebook, which is a digital welcome book. And then we have, if you aren't familiar, we also have a safety course that folks are able to take to really understand, what it means to really present a safe property, and that's all facilitated by my colleague Justin Ford, and it's working, right? There's so many people who are using the platform and seeing tremendous benefits. I'm not going to read through all of these, but I do think there are a couple of really important ones to sort of touch on, which is just the amount of time that can be saved. And I think this will, we'll talk a little bit about this as we talk about last minute bookings, but saving on scheduling, saving on, service calls and questions that are coming in, while also increasing the kind of guest sentiment and the experience, and driving additional revenue. So there's a lot of really strong metrics that folks are seeing when they're utilizing a platform like ours. So that's just a little bit more about us. And we'll get into, how we can sort of help with some of those last minute stays here as we get into the presentation.
And a little bit about PriceLabs. So we're a revenue management and dynamic pricing SaaS, software as a solution, for obviously vacation rentals. That's a lot of what we're talking about today. We're also a good fit for midterm rentals, service apartments or apart hotels, villa chalets, even boutique hotels, RV, and campgrounds as well. We have been around since 2014. We have grown exponentially since I joined, especially about 3.5 years ago. We're now pricing over 550,000 units on a daily basis. and we have customers all over the world. The product is available in 6 different languages now. And our team is entirely remote. So I mentioned that I'm based in Panama City, Florida, but we have a team all over the world. Also, one of my awesome team members joining us today to help on Q&A, Gabriella, with our product specialist team. So really excited to share with you some best practices from a pricing standpoint to get you ready for last minute bookings. And obviously we're going to be talking about how, yes, you can have it all buttoned up pricing wise, but you certainly need to be able to handle it operationally. So with that,
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about.
Koryn, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a message that I was really quiet. So I will try to speak up best as possible. I apologize.
It's never something anyone says about me, I think. Everyone always says you're plenty loud. Can you tone it down a little? So
a lot of people are saying I'm quiet. Okay, well, I'm just gonna talk as loudly as possible, and hopefully it'll keep getting better. Okay. I don't know why. All right, so to go over the agenda, we're first going to be talking about why last minute bookings matter, why the conversions matter, talking about what's reality versus what's gut instinct, talking about the complexity of it all, but we still want to make sure we understand that perceived value is trumping or better than low prices. We're going to be talking about adjusting for last minute bookings with pricing as well as min stay rules, and talking about occupancy based adjustments from the PriceLabs standpoint.
Awesome. And then we're going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about, all right, once you've priced correctly, once you've received the bookings, how do you make sure that you can actually service those properties so that they are ready? And so we're going to focus on a little bit of operational readiness and tips and tricks there, both from how you're creating a great foundation, what are some of the best practices to empower your team for success. We're going to take a look at an operational playbook for last minute bookings and see some of that in action when we look at a quick case study with Van Wall Corporate Rentals. And then we're going to close it out by looking at how you can track performance, both from a task completion and task execution perspective, and also then how that is perceived by your guests and what their first impressions are going to be, and how you can sort of utilize that as you're sort of making some business decisions. And then Amber is going to swoop back in with a couple other pieces in here, and I'll let you sort of talk on that.
Cool. Sorry, still just trying to work on audio. I hope it's better. I'm going to try one more adjustment and see if that helps at all. Does that help a little bit?
You just got louder for me.
Okay. Hopefully that was it. Okay, good. Awesome.
Yay.
Awesome. Okay, yes. And so last but not least, we were talking about tracking performance. So we'll get in. Okay, perfect. Thanks y'all so much. I'm glad it's getting better, but we're going to give you major takeaways and how you can track things. Revenue managers should always be tracking things, but we'll talk a little bit about that later.
And then at the end, right, we have a gift reveal.
Oh, a gift. Yes, we don't want to forget about the surprise gift. So stick around.
The end. And we'll do a Q&A, which will be really fun. All right. You ready?
Yes. And I'm so glad the audio improved.
This is the meat and the bones of it. So this is what you really want to be able to hear. So I think we're in good shape.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's go over to the next slide and turn it over to you, Amber.
Yep. So in terms of the current market reality, a lot of my customer conversations throughout different markets are talking about these shrinking booking windows, and that their idea of an average booking window, not only is that shrinking, but there is just this ongoing demand last minute. And it's different than what it looked like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even last year. More and more bookings are happening last minute. So if they're taking up, it's like as an example, thinking about a couple customers in Miami, their average booking window is probably about 15 days. They're getting a lot of bookings within those last few days. Flip it to when I'm talking to Florida Panhandle customers, and the fact that now it is a reality that people will call in as they are driving to the beach and booking a 5, 6 bedroom luxury property as they are driving to the beach. I cannot tell you how much that would stress me out, but it's a reality. It's happening. So, with this increased spontaneous travel, there's more flexible work arrangement, and there's also a little stuff going on economically and politically that is uncertain, and when there's times of uncertainty, we do see that booking windows tend to shrink. So what do you do from a pricing perspective? What do you do? The urge is to slash prices, right? So you start to feel panicked and you want the price to be lower because you want it to book, and you're afraid it's not going to book if the price is too high. But then I don't want my ADR to get so low, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, that it makes it seem like it's a cheap property when it's not, right? And, if I hold out on rate, if I don't drop my rate, how much of that last minute demand really is there? It's very difficult, even with a software that is updating data on a daily basis. There's still uncertainty there. And Koryn, talk a little bit about the operational side of things.
Yeah, I mean, listen, operations is chaotic enough, even when people are booking 2 months in advance, right? There are so many moving pieces. Operators are servicing properties that are not in one single location that are all the same, right? There's so many complexities to the properties. There are complexities around people, around geography, around timing, right? Plenty of times guests aren't leaving when they're supposed to be, and we know so many of them are arriving before they're supposed to be. And all of those things are creating chaos on a standard day. But when you then start to look at when you think you have that perfect schedule on a Thursday and then Friday you get 10 more bookings, that just throws a huge wrench into it. And so I think being really prepared on the idea of, okay, how are we going to handle our reservations that come in with that short lead time? How do we give ourselves flexibility and additional coverage to handle some of those is super important, because as Amber, you just said, it is a reality that so many folks are dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And I think, the other thing I just want to touch on, which you sort of mentioned at the start of this slide, right, is that like that guest who books last minute has the same expectation for their experience as that guest who booked 2 months ago. Now, I will say, as someone in our industry and as a consumer, I could not handle the stress of driving to the beach trying to find a property to stay at. But for some people, that's just the way that they operate. But I would still have the same expectations around what my experience looks like. And so, when we think about, hey, you might have gotten a better rate. Hey, you may have you booked this yesterday, and so this isn't available. That's not the mentality that the travelers is working under. And so it's how do we deliver that level of hospitality that as an industry we promise our guests and we strive towards every day, even on the quick turnaround. So I think that's a really big key piece of it as well. And we'll talk about that a little more.
Absolutely. All right. So in terms of complexity, talked a little bit about this, and this might be hard to hear for some revenue managers that are on the call, but ultimately, for same day bookings, you've probably already waited too late to optimize. When we talk about optimizing rates, and we're going to talk about optimizing how to fill up your calendar with minimum length of stay rules, if it's day zero, that's what we call it for same day bookings at PriceLabs, day zero, day 1 or 2, just 2 days in advance, you're kind of past your prime in terms of finding that sweet spot, because we mentioned demand uncertainty, right? Yes, maybe it will still book at that rate. Yes, maybe it will still book for 2 or 3 nights, but there is not a certainty there. The data is also jumping around all over the place. So if we're updating, our scrape data updates every 24 hours, but there are 10 or so bookings coming in within those 24 hours, you're going to miss some of that data change. And so there's that data volatility. And so again, you've got that urge to slash prices to really get those conversions. And my favorite, not really, my absolute lack of a favorite, is guest negotiations. So those ones that are calling in as they're driving to the beach, they have this expectation, certainly happens around here, that they can negotiate on price because they think that they are the last opportunity you have for revenue. And they will try to negotiate anything and everything, whether it's a daily rate or an extra add-on amenity or free pool heating or whatnot. They will also try to negotiate, which makes it extra complex.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking, man, I am not right, because I had to book a last minute stay just last week. And I was like, this is what I get for a last minute, getting a one night last minute stay. Or we had accommodations, they fell through. And I would never have even thought to do that. I thought, well, this is, it's my own fault for being so last minute. But you're right. The traveler expectations, the way that the mentality works today, they just feel like, well, I'm doing you a favor, giving you this last minute booking. And they're not going to be an easier guest necessarily. Probably not.
I'm so glad you mentioned their expectations, regardless if they think that they have the right to negotiate on price or anything like that. They still have those high expectations that the property is going to be spick and span. If it's not spick and span, they will probably call and try to get money back for that too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why, when we think about that, that's why that operational piece also has so much complexity to it, right? Because it's not like you can be like, oh, you got a discount and you booked last minute and, we didn't have time to inspect the property. And the guest is going to be like, oh, don't worry about it, right? That is not what's going to happen. Like Amber said, they're calling you to ask you for money back or a refund or something because it didn't meet their expectations. So not only do you have that compressed turnaround time, you're creating like stress on your team, you're creating stress on your managers, on your dispatch. It's likely that when there are those compressed turnaround times, that's when the quality can just take a hit. And whether it's it's never intended, right? But when someone's like, oh, I just got a last minute clean put on my schedule, I thought I had 4 hours to do this clean, I really need it to be done in 2.5, right? That's when things can go a little astray. And so one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit more, right, is the quality control. And how do you maintain quality control under increased pressures? How do you make sure that you continue to have visibility on a standard day when everything goes perfectly? And I say that in air quotes because I don't think that actually happens, right? But when it goes almost perfect, sort of where your exceptions are going to be, where you might need to throw somebody in to help support a clean, or maybe need to switch an inspection. You have a little bit more visibility there, but when you start to throw in those additional last minute needs, that just puts additional stress there. So it is really important that like I said earlier, you have a plan for how you're going to handle these. And also sort of think about, how do I communicate differently with the guest who booked 12 hours before they arrive? Because I have to take my conversation journey, my client communication journey that may typically be based off of 14 days and now condense that down. And I don't want to be bombarding them with 72 messages over the next 10 minutes, So thinking about what that looks like is also super important.
That is not something I think about often, but that's so true.
Yeah.
Getting 10 emails at one time.
They still need it all. So
yeah.
So yeah. All right. Well, we talk about that perceived value versus low price. Yeah.
So it's along the same lines of guest expectations, right? So price, I've heard it said, we've said it before, others have said it before, that revenue management boils down to the right price for the right guest at the right time. And that's an even trickier game when it becomes a last minute booking. But it's still important to remember that price is showing value. It's still communicating value. It's still setting expectations. And we're always aiming for that sweet spot between again, affordability and quality, right? So the guest is looking for that, and we are looking for that. We are looking for that in order for conversions, for a guest to say, hey, that's exactly what I think it should be worth and what I can afford. But it's still something important to keep in mind, because I know what it's like when you're looking over the next week or even the next 2 weeks. And if you're only seeing about 10% occupancy or so in that time, it's really nerve wracking. And the first urge I think that you get is to just start slashing prices every single day. If there's still openings, you're still lowering those prices. But you want to make sure that you already have in mind like a minimum price that you're comfortable with just for that particular time point or time frame, so that you're not missing out on your perceived value. You're not miscommunicating that through your price point.
And I think it's also interesting, right? When we were talking about like last minute bookings here too, but it's also about like when we start like really like slashing prices, which as you said, that is like the natural inclination, that also sets a precedent, right? And that not only for you as a potential future guest, but for that guest in our industry in general, right? They start to think like, oh, well, if I just keep waiting. So it's this like a cyclical thing that just continues to happen.
Yeah, it's training guest behavior, really.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amazing. Okay.
So now we're going to dig a little bit more into detail of strategies that you can take, particularly in PriceLabs. But I will try to keep in mind, not everyone here is using PriceLabs. So I'm going to try to describe it also, because before PriceLabs, I had experience manually adjusting things. So I'm going to try to use both of those perspectives when talking about these strategies. So first and foremost, we're talking about those last minute discounts, right? And when you are managing rates manually, you're probably going in there every day, particularly, like I said, when you're looking at that last minute booking window, whether you define that as 7 days, 14 days, or even a full month, right? Where you're looking at kind of the next 30 days and you're saying, hey, what adjustments can I make to those openings to try to get them to book? And you're probably doing that on a daily basis. You're probably trying to keep it gradual and not do anything too sudden. But again, those last few days is probably when you're like, hey, I just need something. And that's when that dramatic slashing starts to happen. So what a software like PriceLabs can do, particularly for PriceLabs, we now have market-driven last-minute pricing. So what that means is that the algorithm is looking at what's happening in the market and deciding, hey, what is the last minute booking window for right now? And how aggressive do we need to be with those decreases to rate? I don't really like to call them discounts, but decreases to rate over that last minute booking window to try to get more bookings. And you could come into the system today and then look again next week and it'll be different, right? So it's automatically adjusting based on what's happening in the market. And now, most recently, I would say within the last few months or so, there's now an option to where you have, oh, I want to be aggressive with that market driven approach. Balanced is the default, the sort of moderate approach, or I want to be a little more conservative with that market approach. Now, you can still make your own decision on last minute discounts. But usually what we see work best is like a gradual discount. So imagine it's a gradual 30% discount over the next 2 weeks. That's roughly 2% per day. That's increasing over time so that same day bookings get that 30% decrease. But tomorrow, if they were booking for a stay tomorrow, it'd be 28, the next day 26, et cetera, et cetera. So we love that approach, that gradual approach to these last minute discounts. And honestly, any customer, anytime they are talking about, venting about this sort of last minute uncertainty, I encourage the market approach, the market-based approach, so that they're not having to be in there every single day and just kind of guessing, right? And then in addition to that last minute pricing, that's going to gradually decrease that rate over that last minute booking window. We also encourage a last minute minimum stay. So a shorter minimum length of stay requirement for those last minute bookings. And the example I have here is that your default or ideal rule is that 3-night minimum. But then when it's within 14 nights, you're okay with, in this particular case. And let me just say that what we always say is make sure you think about operationally what you can handle, right? So that's where Breezeway comes in. But in this particular example, this operator is okay with a 1-night minimum during the week last minute. When it's 14 days out, they'll take a 2-day reservation on the weekend. But very, very last minute, less than a week in advance, is they'll even reduce it to that 1-night minimum. Again, though, because this particular operator can handle that. Not all operations can. So I'm definitely excited to get into the operation side of things to how you could potentially make that possible. And then moving on to the next subject. So those last minute discounts and those last minute min stay rules or minimum length of stay rules, they're really helpful for when you're in it, when you're in that last minute booking window, right? Well, the next couple things I'm going to talk about are things you can do when you're outside of that last minute booking window so that you're not scrambling last minute. And one of my absolute favorite strategies is occupancy based adjustments. So this in this screenshot, this is completely customized, and it's customized based on just like sort of fake scenario that I made up to where the day ranges, and it's probably tiny, so forgive me, but the day ranges are at the top and they go from 0 all the way to 120 days. That means that starting 4 months out, the system will start to look at a listing's occupancy and further optimize the rate based on that listing's how open or how booked that listing is. The zeros, they work in like a diagonal direction. Zeros are where you have your occupancy goals based on booking window. And then anything that is below that goal gets a gradual decrease to rate. Anything above that goal would get a gradual increase or premium on the rate. And what this allows the system to do is it can already work to find that sweet spot, automatically trying to find that sweet spot based on your occupancy so that you're not scrambling as much last minute. It stacks on top of last minute discounts. So you'll want to keep that in mind when you're looking at the last minute discount. But let's say with these occupancy based adjustments, if you have little to no occupancy, less than 10% occupancy over the next couple of weeks, the occupancy based adjustment would drop that rate 20%. And then that last minute discount may drop it a few more percentage points. So all that is to say is it's this gradual approach, and it's looking further out. It starts further out so that it's just a gradual, it's a gradual way to find that sweet spot automatically, versus what you might be doing manually right now is already looking that far out, looking to next season, right? Looking to next season and saying, hey, this one isn't booking so well, so today I'm going to decrease the rate about 5%. You come in the next week or after a few days, hey, I'm going to drop it maybe a couple more percentage points. And then, so you're, like I said, probably already doing that manually. And what this would do is make those adjustments automatically for you. And like I said, it's one of my favorite strategies because it is automatically responding to that occupancy. And if that means that you are somehow slightly missing the mark and you go in the opposite direction, you start to book too quickly, well, that's what those additional premiums are for. Awesome. So last but not least, along the same lines, we talked about having a last minute minimum length of stay rule. But what you can do with PriceLabs is you can also have far out settings for minimum length of stay. So what that means is if ideally you want that 3-night minimum, take baby steps beyond that 3-night minimum so that when guests book far in advance or outside of your average booking window, you're requiring them to stay longer. And as the booking window reduces, that minimum length of stay requirement reduces. So in this example, I would say that the way this is set up, their average booking window is probably about 30 to 45 days out. And So when guests are booking outside of that average booking window, instead of requiring that 3 nights, if they're booking more than 90 nights or 3 months in advance, this operator is requiring a 5-night minimum. Now, then if between 45 nights and 90 nights in advance they're booking, then it reduces to a 4-night minimum. Then it reduces to that 3-night minimum, and last minute within 14 nights it drops to a 2-night minimum. So it's baby steps down in terms of your minimum length of stay requirement. And what that allows the calendar to do is to fill up optimally. So if someone comes in and books far in advance and they were to only book that 3-night minimum, but then someone more last minute comes in and let's say 30 nights in advance and they want to book the whole week, well, you miss out on a week's worth of revenue for 3 nights of revenue. So we've actually seen data wise that users, when they have gone from a static or single digit minimum stay, just a 3-night across the board, for example, moving to this cascading minimum structure, we've seen as much as a 10% lift in revenue from this strategy. And again, what that allows you to do, which ideally when it comes to those last minute bookings, is that you're not relying solely on price point to get a guest to convert. And theoretically, if someone is booking further in advance, you would think that, oh, they're planning way in advance, so they should be planning for a longer stay. And theoretically, if they're, looking for that last minute vacation, they are maybe looking for a shorter stay. There's this phenomenon happening this year again that I'm having customers tell me that they're calling day of to stay for a week. So maybe that's still happening, but this cascading rule set can still help you optimally fill up that calendar.
I wish I was that spontaneous. I just can't do it.
I know, me too.
I think that's so interesting, Amber, too, because I do think so often it's, especially as you look at your occupancy and your occupancy may not be where you want it to be. And someone writes in and they're like, we're only looking to come for 3 nights. People are often so, like hungry for the booking that you take that. And then you potentially end up putting yourself in a difficult situation as you get a bit closer. And you do have some folks who may want to stay for a longer period. So I love this cascading rule that you guys offer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Should we, once you've got them booked, you've got the right rate, they're in there. Let's talk a little bit about how we make sure that they're walking into a clean, safe, well-maintained property and how that's ready. So, I think when we sort of think about like, what do you need to build? What do you need to have, or what are the important components that allow you to be, more, allow you to drive and be more successful? I think that really goes to a strong operational foundation. And the reality is that, this stuff is all really relevant, whether it's a last minute booking or whether it is a booking that meets your standard booking window, but it becomes so much more important in that last minute scenario, because you're already so stressed and sort of, there's crunch time there. So, when we think about like what really builds that strong foundation, we think about like the ability to instantly schedule. So the reservation gets made, and then what needs to be done. Visibility into who's going where, how much workload you've already assigned to teams, and understanding sort of what folks' capacity is also really important. It doesn't matter if you can automatically schedule a task and you've now given someone 17 cleans in a day, right? You need to be able to look at what does their calendar look like? What is their ability? How much can they do? And so having a system that actually is able to instantly schedule and automatically create those tasks for you is really important. And again, that is across the board every day of the year, but it is more important when a last minute booking comes in, because you may not have someone who is just sitting there watching for those bookings to come in. And oftentimes when tasks are not being automatically created, that's when things get missed, because you don't have somebody who's coming in, they miss a reservation, which is obviously not what anybody wants. And then that guest comes into a dirty property. So that is, being able to have a reservation made and tasks automatically created that are align with the needs of that reservation is super, super important. And it's also really important that you're communicating with your team in real time. Um, I think a lot about experiences that I've had as I've been in market and staying with people, right? And the opportunity to understand, hey, where is my team? How much work do they still have? Where is their capacity to actually like where is their capacity to actually maybe transition work or move work from person to person to make it a little bit easier, but also letting them know what's going on, right? If I know that I have a last minute clean coming in, I need to be made aware of that so that I can sort of embrace the work that I'm doing and really focus on that, and maybe in some instances move a little faster if I need to. But you need to understand what's there, and you need your team to have the ability to communicate with one another in a two-way form versus that then is got visibility across your entire team. Because again, in those last minute scenarios, your team is already sort of deployed to where they're going to be and what they need to be doing. And so having the ability for that to be seen by not only, Amber, but by Amber and myself and anyone else that may need to take action on that can be really powerful. And then you can better set your team up for success, to do the work that they need to. Specifically, when we come to that quality assurance, and we're going to talk a little bit about like how to make a team successful, but before we get to that, I do think that it is really important, and I talked about this earlier, that you have checklists. I was just on a call with somebody earlier today, and they were saying, prior to using Breezeway, they were reliant on paper checklists. Paper checklists are really hard to facilitate when it is a last minute booking and your team is already out in the field and they do not have that to work off of. So anything that can be digitized, anything that can be sent out, over apps or communicated via text is really important, because you need them to be able to maintain those standards, especially if it's stuff that they weren't expecting to do. Another thing that is really powerful, and I know this is a shock, right? We're having a webinar, and I'm gonna talk about AI a little bit here, but those AI powered auto replies and some of the checkout detections can be incredibly valuable to set you up for success when it comes to last minute bookings. And so what I mean by that, and again, this is something that we do, and we do this through automation in Breezeway. You could do this manually if you needed to, though it would certainly require more effort. We have the ability on a checkout day to message a guest that is in-house and have them let you know when they are leaving. So often, and I know, Amber, when you were in the Panhandle, right, this is something that I'm sure you guys experience. It's a big drive market. And so there are a lot of times where people are getting up super early and they're leaving, and you have the opportunity to get into properties earlier. The faster and earlier we can get properties turned and ready, the better suited and set up you are to be successful if you do get those last minute bookings come in. And so when that guest checks out at 6 a.m. and they leave, they can tell you that, and we can automatically notify your cleaner that that property is now open. Now, that doesn't mean that your cleaners go into the property at 8 o'clock, but it might mean that they go, or at 6 o'clock, but it might mean that they go at 8. And that may mean the difference of being able to get another clean. And when you have that happen, again, just incredibly powerful, because whether it's a last minute booking or not, you then potentially set yourself up to be able to surprise and delight the incoming guest by letting them know their property is ready an hour early or something like that. And so really being able to automate some of those responses, understand what's going on, and then communicate that out externally to your team is super important. And I think, again, sort of thinking about like, hey, this last minute booking came in, now what needs to happen? That won't be the only case. It won't only be a last minute booking. You're going to have guests who get into a property and maybe they're unhappy. Maybe something breaks when that guest, the guest is checking out that morning, and you can't put them into a property because there's no AC. You need to be able to move people. And so you need to be able to be prepared to have that flexibility and make sure that there are alternative solutions for folks.
Mm-hmm.
So really, just sort of foundational things that certainly are far more applicable and sort of create a lot more value on last minute days, but create value every day of the work that's being done. And we want to talk about your team, right? Because again, it doesn't really matter how great your process is if you don't have the people who are in the field who can actually who can actually do the work and be successful. And so, I think when we think about how do we best set our team up for success, specifically when we think about last minute bookings, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the operational playbook, but make sure that you have some open time on some of your cleaner schedules. That's going to allow you to dedicate that person for those last minute bookings. Give yourself that backup system where where there's flexibility to pull someone and move them to a different property if they need to. We talked a little bit about this on that last slide, but again, last minute communications become really important when you or become far more successful when you have the ability to communicate what is going on in real time and in a way where there's visibility across the team. I don't know how often I've been in client offices and I've heard somebody on the phone, and whether it's them coming in with a last minute booking and needing to scramble to schedule an inspector to go out and check a property, or whether it's a guest who's been booked for 6 months who comes in early and wants to get into that property, being able to communicate with your team of what needs to be done and make sure that they're seeing that and that they can confirm that back to you is incredibly important. And I know that there's probably some people on the call that are like, well, I do that. We text with my cleaners, and that is phenomenal. Except the only person that knows that is you and the cleaner. And so the other person who may be getting the guest call doesn't know that. And that means that in order for Joe to answer that guest's question, they've got to contact you or the cleaner to get that information. And that just slows everybody down. And so, having the ability to have visibility with real-time updates is incredibly important. And then monitor like response time and your quality metrics. If you're finding that there are specific people on your team who are consistently getting callbacks or who can't work under some of those higher stress situations, make sure that you're not assigning them on those last minute bookings, and that's going to help them find more success, and then ultimately as a business you guys find more success as well. When you think about process optimization, again, I've talked about checklists a lot because I really, really believe that that is what is going to drive consistent quality, whether it is a very seasoned person who has been doing this for, 10 years or somebody where it's their 10th day. You're not always in the same properties. The properties change. There are different things that need to be done in all of them. And so having checklists that your team can work off of, and then also that you can verify. So when you start to think about, okay, I've got this checklist, I've asked them to go out and do this thing. What if there is a scenario where you do have a last minute booking and you can't get an inspector in? But you can go through and you can verify how that clean was done, and you can sort of do a remote inspection. It's certainly not the ideal for everyone. I know there are a lot of companies who try to get in and inspect every property before a guest arrives, but we also know that sometimes it's just not possible. When you are using checklists and you can verify and require photos, that gives you another piece of peace of mind, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? That the work was done the way that it was supposed to be done. And it also sort of covers you in the event that guest gets in and has any issues, or, I saw this just the other day where a guest said, oh, we checked in and we didn't like it. And they went in the next day to do a touch up and sort of re-clean. And the guest had completely trashed the property. And so, we unfortunately, we want to assume that every guest has the best of intentions, but there are some that don't. And so this is really important for you, again, every day, but really even more so on those last minute bookings, to make sure that you have that photo verification. And that's something that, their photos are time stamped. And then there's value there. And then also think about, how are you making sure that you have the right inventory? The worst scenario is on a busy turn day and you aren't expecting that you're going to have any last minute bookings, and you don't have the supplies that you need out with you. So make sure that you're looking at your inventory, your stock levels, what is needed, and making sure that you have that those additional inventory items to facilitate those quick turns.
I love the photos, by the way.
Yeah.
Just going back to me talking about the guest negotiations that can happen. If you have a photo that there's clear evidence that, I don't know, they'd always complain, I feel like linens, they'd be like, oh, these linens are not clean. And You have proof that they are clean. So
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah, and we've seen people actually, and now not a lot, so I don't want to like set this precedent, but we have had some scenarios where people have been able to win chargebacks because of the photo verification. So that is, again, we're talking about last minute bookings, but there are additional benefits that you're going to see when you're sort of employing a lot of these practices.
Mhm.
Um, so I think when we think about that operational playbook, again, some of these things we've talked about, but you guys as a business really need to identify what is a last minute booking operationally. There's a difference between what is a last minute booking from a revenue perspective, but then operationally, Amber, you talked about it earlier. What can your team operationally commit to? How can they service those properties? I know there are companies out in the Outer Banks, for example, where they started selling early check-ins and everyone was like, heck yeah, I'm in, like, let me get in. And then realized very quickly operationally that like, whoa, we can't do this many, early arrivals. And so I think it's really important to sort of look at the way that your team is structured and the resources that you have and figure out what qualifies as a last minute booking, what will work, what can you actually execute on. So for some scenarios that might be an arrival that's made within 24 hours. For some, it may be that they have the ability to service same day bookings. But that is certainly not the case for everybody, especially in really high season. So it's really important, obviously, to think about what that looks like. And then also make sure, again, we talked about this, and I said we were going to talk about it a little bit in the operational playbook, but that your team is aware as quickly as possible. There are always some limitations to APIs around, like, it's not full real time in many situations where a reservation is made and then all of a sudden all of these things are here. For us, and in general, dependent upon the PMS, it's usually 1 to 2 hours that it can take at a maximum for those reservations to come over. But you want to make sure that when those reservations are coming in, that that the work is being communicated outward. And if it does require, right, on that last minute booking, again, thinking about what can we do, what can we effectively manage, where you do need to go in and maybe manually add something, then that when that clean is added, that cleaner or that inspector or whomever is responsible for completing that work is going to get that automatic notification. We've got scenarios in our platform where you can actually have somebody accept a task. And so then, hey, I had this last minute booking come in. I sent it to, Julie, but is Julie going to be able to do it? Right. You have the ability to say, hey, I need you to accept or decline this task. And so those are some things that can be really important and super impactful. And then, like I said earlier, or actually just said it just now, right, about like that dispatch protocol. Obviously, the automation is super important, and I know we're working on a regular basis to continue to condense that time frame to make sure that they're as close to real time as possible. And that has certainly happened with a number of our partners. But you do want to make sure that you have somebody who's sort of, air traffic control on those busy turn days, and that they are they know who our on-call people are. They know how to smartly route someone to the closest property. I love one of the functionalities, and I should have put a screenshot in here on our platform, is a map of where your team is and where the properties are located and what sort of I keep saying capacity, but essentially how much of their work they've done, right? How much more is on their docket and what does that look like? We also show you, like, is there an arrival or a departure at this property, right? So being able to say, hey, Amber, actually, I'm going to have you not go to 127 and I'm going to have you go to 432 because 127 guest doesn't arrive until 8 p.m. Right. And so really smartly starting to manipulate those days where when you don't have last minute bookings, that doesn't really matter as much, but you sort of want to have someone, we talked a little bit about this. You want to use tech and automation to actually like schedule your work and to do your work or to set your rates, but you still need somebody to come in here and sort of be manning it in some capacity. And so, making sure that you've got somebody from an operations perspective who is looking at what's being scheduled and what's being done and doing that work. And then again, just sort of making sure when you do have those last minute bookings, are you being smart, right? We have different turnover checklists for a same day turnover versus just a regular check-in or check out. And so making sure that you're sort of looking at that and what needs to be done and what are the highest priorities, because again, your guests still have the same expectations, whether they booked a day in advance or 12 weeks in advance. So using those checklists really effectively, and then communicating clearly, right? Those last minute bookings, you may need to say, hey, we're really excited for you to come, but your property may not be ready until 5 p.m. And so just having and setting the right expectations with your guests is super, super important. And then this is just, this is a really quick, I just want to share this with you guys because I do think this is important. These guests were specifically seeing a lot of last minute bookings, and we're running into some conflicts. And so these are some of the benefits that they saw, and they eliminated a lot of manual conflicts with work. They were able to better coordinate their team. They had more control with photo verification. And they were seeing significant, business results. So saved cleaning hours, increased revenue. And then ultimately that allowed them to grow their portfolio of properties. So, again, last minute bookings is one piece of it, but it's certainly a big part of it as well.
Love those data points, by the way. Love that you shared
And
that.
kind of crazy, right? Because I think so often
Yeah.
we look at, especially from an operations perspective, is like, oh, it's this piece of work that we obviously have to do. It's so important, but is it driving revenue? And so when you start to think about the impact that the operational work that's being done can have is really important. I'm going to finish my piece here, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Amber. But when you start to think about how do you track performance from an operations perspective, it is a lot about benchmarking, right? How long do the tasks take on average? Not how long does a departure clean take, or how long does a turnover clean take? It's how long does a task at this property take on average? And that is going to help you understand, especially when there are last minute bookings, where those can fit in. So look at, how long your tasks are taking. Look at how often are you completing work before your check-in time. Look at your callback percentages. Look at the response time from your team. Check out the guest arrival rating. So this is something new that we're offering, right? Where guests can actually provide just a star rating on their arrival and sort of first impressions. And if you're consistently seeing really high first impressions, that's amazing. We want to make sure that we're obviously recognizing and rewarding the work from those folks. But if you're seeing really low, it gives you an opportunity to do some coaching and to maybe make some changes or some retraining with particular people. But I think, if I had to pick one way to track that performance, it's all around like task completion time, and percentage of readiness pre-arrival.
Yeah. From a revenue standpoint, I would hope that you all are tracking more than just revenue. Weekly, monthly, hopefully you're meeting with your team at least once a month, checking on those KPIs, not only looking forward, but also looking back. What lessons can you learn by looking back? Those lessons learned, what can you implement moving forward? And I like sticking to really the big three: the occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR, just as a pulse on performance. When it comes to this last minute game, that is when pacing of these KPIs really comes into play. As of this day last year, where was I with occupancy, with ADR, with RevPAR? I'm behind where I was this time last year. Let's just say that, because the booking windows are shrinking. So occupancy isn't quite where it was for September last year, as of this day last year. So what's going on here? And so when you're pacing against yourself, you're looking for potentially those rate adjustments, but it's also really important to say, hey, what's going on in the market too? Because if the booking window is shrinking for you and it's shrinking for the market, it's really important to know that, hey, maybe I can hold on to rate a little bit longer. Maybe I need to rely more on those occupancy based adjustments for now, not yet implement those last minute discounts, and just see how it pans out, because the market is also pacing behind. Usually that's a sign of those shrinking booking windows, when the market is pacing behind. So really important to not only pace against your own performance, but pace against market performance as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think, so often it's nice to have friends locally and also just globally, right? That you can talk to and say, what are your numbers looking like, right? And I think that that's really really helpful. And I think that also, that is it a me problem or is it a market problem, applies operationally as well. So
absolutely.
This I think is our last slide before we get to the surprise, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, so some key takeaways. I think this applies for both of us, right? Like the technology integrations and technology software helps eliminate manual coordination bottlenecks, but it does not. It helps. It should say it helps reduce coordination bottlenecks. It does not eliminate them. The creme de la creme, right? Of which I would say both Breezeway and PriceLabs are of their respective categories. They still need somebody to look at it. It is best case scenario when you have the person who really understands the ins and outs, making sure that all the tech is functioning and operating and doing what you need it to do for your business.
Yeah. And, automation, that's key, but it's automation to save you time from doing things that software can do for you. But there always has to be, to your point, human oversight to it. It's not going to completely, these automated last minute discounts, these automated occupancy based adjustments, minimum stay, it's not going to eliminate the need for potentially further adjustments, or at least looking over it and making sure the price point is something that you're comfortable with. And it's just, again, like the gradual, I would say another key is gradual adjustments, right? Making those gradual adjustments and trying to resist that urge to just slash prices to get last minute conversions, and being as flexible as you can with minimum stay based on what you can handle operationally.
Yeah. And I think, the only other thing I would say on here, right, is the quality standards. You can continue to maintain those. You can continue to have that guest experience that you expect, even under pressure, if you have the right processes in place. And so it really goes back to that strong foundation and setting yourself up for success there. So.
Absolutely.
All right. The surprise gift reveal. If you stuck, thank you. You made it.
Drum roll.
Yeah, I'm like, is there a drum roll? We should have an audio on here. All right, here we go.
Okay, we'll start with PriceLabs for new signups. So if you are not yet a PriceLabs user, you will get 15% off the first 3 months. Now, your first month is always free. That's your free trial. But of the billable months, those first 3 months will be 15% off. This is for all new signups through September 8th. And we have a QR code there if you want to scan that with your phone. There's the promo code right there. So the QR code will take you to the sign up page, and you can enter that promo code to get the 15% off your first 3 bills.
Love it. And again, sort of same caveats, new signups, new Breezeway clients. And our offer is valid through September 5th. We are offering 25% off for the first 3 months of service. And so you can book a demo with our team, kind of learn a little bit more about what we're all about with this QR code. And that will be a nice little surprise. So valid for 3 months as well. So yes, I guess we'll leave this slide up for just a sec, because I think the last slide that we have is just sort of a question slide. So maybe Amber, it's up for people if you want to grab the QR codes and then maybe go in any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll leave that up, and you all just go ahead and you can use the QA function or chat. We're able to see both of them at this point. And we'll stay on for a few more minutes for any questions.
Amazing. This has been fun.
I know, so fun. Back in the day, I did, like 8 years ago, I helped inspect within some inspections one turn day in peak summer in might have been 2019. So early days of Breezeway, but we were using Breezeway.
I love that.
Yeah. So I know all about like just being able to communicate in the app even back then was huge.
Yeah, that's amazing.
There is one question came into chat. Do you prefer having a cleaning fee or no, especially considering one night stays last minute? Good question. From a revenue manager standpoint, I always want a cleaning fee. Cleaning fees can get tricky when it comes, in my opinion, it's trickier in the off season. And if it was a last minute, really low nightly price, it can get tricky because then the cleaning fee might be more than your nightly rate. But those fees are still going to cleaners, right? And it's really important, especially here, it's really important to maintain those relationships. So I am a fan of always having a cleaning fee. I know that's not like the necessarily the trend nowadays. But yes, I would say always a cleaning fee.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, I know that there's some folks who are baking in the cleaning fee into their nightly rate. And so I think that that's certainly something that you need to consider. But I mean, the reality is whether someone's there for a night or 12 nights, you still have to clean the property. And certainly the level of clean is going to be different. So unless there's another way in which you're going to make up that fee, or it's going to be a cost that you're just going to incur as a business expense, I would advocate that is also still really important to maintain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good
But it can
question
be
though.
hard as a consumer, right? Like when you think about like from the consumer perspective, where I booked this place for one night and then I get hit with a $375 cleaning fee. That's a tough pill to swallow.
I know. I think it's so hard also because um, it's hard to see it from the guest perspective. That in particular, just from being in the industry for so long, and from that helping the inspection process. And I mean, when it's a 5, 6 bedroom house, that is a lot of work. That is a lot of work. And even if you're only going to stay in that 6 bedroom for 2 nights, you still need to pay for that full house to be cleaned.
Right,
So,
right. And I think that's what a lot of people think, right? Like, oh, I'm only going to use one bedroom. So you only have to clean one bedroom. So why am I paying the full cleaning fee? But the reality is that the next guest doesn't want the next guest wants a clean home. They want to walk into a property that feels like no one has ever stayed there. And so, yeah, I think
yeah.
it's really tricky, but yeah, I think cleaning fees are certainly something, unless you have like a way that you've sort of set that up internally to like have like a fund that you can sort of pull from, but I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't see the Q&A, so I will defer
Yeah.
to you if anything else is coming in because I've got this up on my screen right now.
I do not see any questions in the Q&A, and no more questions in chat. Um, but you can certainly reach out to us.
Oh, did that?
For PriceLabs, it's support@pricelabs.co, for any questions or interest in product. So certainly let us know. I know that, especially of the aspects within PriceLabs that I talked about today, it was not a how-to. So I understand if there are questions. So certainly let us know if you have any questions about that.
Yeah, same thing. On our website, if you guys have questions about Breezeway, you can go directly there. If you're an existing Breezeway customer and you want to talk about anything, how to maximize your product, how you're using the product, or anything like that, or just support@breezeway.io. So I don't think we put a slide in there for ours, but just support@breezeway.io. Or VIP if you are looking to talk to the team about potentially getting started.
Oh, there is a question. Does PriceLabs monitor hotel room costs now? Yes, we do. We actually have always, excuse me, scraped booking.com for hotel rates. And we have incorporated that to a small degree, even into our recommended prices for short-term rentals or vacation rentals. For hotel users, we now allow hotel users to say, hey, weigh the booking.com data more heavily, make it more important than that Airbnb and Vrbo short-term rental data. Very soon, the booking.com short-term rental data will also be in the data that we're using to come up with recommended prices. But yes, we do have booking.com data for hotel users.
Love that.
Nice. And some really nice comments. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Cool, cool. All right.
Amazing. So fun. This was really fun. Thank you
Yes.
everybody for sticking with us, and hopefully you got some little tidbits you can implement into your business.